Some relationships don't end with a dramatic fight or betrayal. Sometimes you simply choose distance. You choose silence. You choose to protect your peace. But suddenly, the other person falls apart. They panic. They accuse. They break. As if your absence ripped out something vital inside them. Why does this happen? Carl Jung offers us an answer. In relationships driven by unconscious forces, you're not seen as you. You're a symbol, a projection. The other person doesn't relate to who you are, but to the emotional function you fulfill in their psyche. Have you ever felt like someone needed you to be something for them? A caretaker? A protector? A constant listener? Maybe you didn't agree to this role, but they silently assigned it to you. So when you step away, you don't just leave a relationship. You destroy an internal illusion. You were never just a person. You were emotional scaffolding. Their calm, their mirror, their stability. This collapse isn't about love. It's about loss of function. Psychologist John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth studied this deeply. In anxious attachment, the fear of being left isn't just fear, it's terror. For these individuals, your presence equals safety. Your predictability equals survival. When you withdraw, it triggers a psychic emergency. What about you? Have you ever tried to set boundaries only to be called cold, selfish, or cruel? Did you feel guilty for needing space? Let me ask you this. Were you truly loved, or were you emotionally used? Margaret Mailer called this moment a forced birth. It's when a person, emotionally fused with you, is suddenly pushed to see themselves as separate. For many, that separation was never completed in childhood. They never became emotionally whole. And when you leave, it feels like being torn apart. Here's the truth. You didn't hurt them. You triggered a rupture that was waiting to happen. Pause and reflect. Have you ever been the mirror someone refused to let go of? Share your experience in the comments. I read them all. Have you ever been someone's emotional anchor? Not by choice, but because the moment you stepped into their life, they clung to you, silently, urgently. They may have called it love, but it was more like survival. When you're someone's anchor, your role is not to love, but to stabilize. And that's the trap. In this dynamic, you become their emotional GPS. They look to you for direction, for calm, for meaning. You say something kind, they breathe. You say nothing, they panic. It's not about you. It's about what they can't manage within themselves. This is where the emotional codependency starts. You become the soothing lullaby for their inner chaos. And slowly, you stop existing as a separate person. Your identity merges into their coping mechanism. And here's the catch. The moment you say, I need space, it feels like betrayal. Pause here. Have you ever had someone say, I don't know who I am without you? Think about that for a second. That's not romance. That's unresolved identity. That's emotional outsourcing. Jung called these people unconscious dependence. They outsource self-regulation. Their peace depends on your presence. Their identity depends on your response. And when you pull away, even slightly, they feel like they're falling into a void. Let's take a modern example. Imagine a woman named Sarah who always texts her partner before bed, every single night. One night, she doesn't. Maybe she's tired. Maybe she just wants quiet. But the next morning, her partner explodes. Accusations fly. You don't care. You've changed. Who were you with? But nothing happened, except that Sarah didn't show up to regulate someone else's emotions. That's all it took to shake the entire relationship. See how fragile that foundation is? Here's a question. Are you in a relationship where your absence feels more powerful than your presence? Where you're needed more for keeping someone stable than for being understood? If yes, you may be the emotional anchor they never learned to replace with themselves. Now, let's flip it. Have you ever relied on someone so much that the thought of losing them made you panic? Not because they were harmful, but because they were everything? If yes, Ask yourself, are you using someone to avoid doing your own emotional work? This isn't blame. This is awareness. Real growth begins when we stop using people as emotional tools and start seeing them as whole, autonomous beings. People are not prescriptions for your pain. Let that sink in. If any of this resonates, hit the like button and share your thoughts. The comments section is a space to reflect, not just respond. Most people believe love is about connection, but sometimes it's more about roles, silent roles, invisible contracts, expectations no one speaks of, but everyone feels. Maybe you've played one: the good listener, the fixer, the emotional support hotline. You became indispensable not because they knew you, but because they needed what you provided. This is where resentment is born. At first, it's subtle. You feel drained after every conversation. You start rehearsing goodbyes in your head. You fantasize about silence. But then guilt creeps in. They need me. They'll fall apart. What if I'm the only one they have? And you stay, not out of love, but out of obligation. But here's the truth. When love becomes emotional labor, it stops being love. Psychologist Dr. Gabor Mate said, when you say yes to others but you're dying inside, you're not being noble, you're being dishonest. That's harsh, but honest. In every emotionally enmeshed relationship, there comes a moment, a quiet tipping point. You realize you're no longer with someone, you're holding them. You've become the container for their pain, their disappointment, their unmet childhood needs. And you ask, but who holds me? This is the grief no one talks about, the grief of realizing you were never truly seen, that your value in the relationship was conditional, that your silence was praised more than your truth. Let me tell you something brutal, but freeing. The moment you express a boundary in a codependent bond, you stop being useful. And when you're no longer useful, you become selfish, difficult, or even toxic. Not because you changed, but because you stopped playing the role they silently assigned to you. So here's a question for you. Who are you when you're not helping anyone? When no one needs you? When you're not the fixer, the caretaker, the pleaser? That's the part of you most worth protecting. And most relationships built on projection will never get close to it. If you've ever felt invisible in a relationship, even while being everything for someone, drop A in the comments. You're not alone, and it's time to be seen. You don't truly understand someone until you see how they handle your no. It's easy to love someone when you're saying yes, when you're accommodating, when you're adjusting yourself to fit their needs. But say no once, just once, and everything shifts. That's when the real test begins. Because a mature love respects boundaries. But a projected bond, it collapses under the weight of your autonomy. In psychological terms, what's happening here is rupture, a necessary one. Carl Jung called it individuation, the painful but essential process of separating your identity from the roles you were trained to play. To become whole, you must disappoint the stories others wrote about you. That includes being the hero, the perfect partner, the emotional savior. You were never born to save someone else's life at the cost of your own, but here's where many people get stuck. They confuse guilt with morality. They believe that disappointing others is wrong, that having boundaries is selfish, that taking space is abandonment. Let's be clear, guilt is often a sign that you're finally doing something for yourself, and that's not betrayal. That's self-return. Here's a scene that may feel familiar. You tell someone you can't talk tonight. They respond with silence, then passive aggression. Maybe they say, I guess you're too busy for me now, and suddenly you're explaining your humanity, apologizing for needing rest, justifying your existence. Stop. You don't owe people explanations for taking care of yourself. And any bond that breaks under the weight of your no was not a bond. It was a transaction. You're not here to maintain someone else's emotional comfort, at the expense of your own wholeness. So here's the truth. You don't lose people when you set boundaries. You lose the illusion that they ever truly accepted the real you. Now pause and ask yourself, who are the people in your life who love you even when you say no? Who respects your silence, your distance, your humanness? These are the ones worth keeping, because real love doesn't bind, it liberates. If this hits home, leave A or A in the comments. And if you're on the journey of reclaiming your identity, like this video, subscribe, and share with someone who needs this message. Let's stop performing roles. Let's start becoming whole. After rupture comes silence. And in that silence, something incredible happens. Clarity. No more noise. No more emotional fog. Just you and the raw truth you've been avoiding for years. You start to see who loved the real you and who only loved the version of you that served them. It hurts. Let's not pretend it doesn't. When people walk away from you just because you stop performing, it triggers a very old wound, the fear of being unworthy when you're not useful. But maybe that pain isn't a punishment. Maybe it's a purification. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what he didn't say out loud is how many people you have to lose along the way. Let's talk about grief. Not just the grief of losing others, but the grief of losing yourself. The version of you that was always available, the people pleaser, the emotionally convenient one. You mourn her, you miss him. You sometimes wonder, was I better when I was more lovable? But that version of you wasn't love. It was performance. You are now grieving the death of your false self, and that is sacred. Now begins the slow return to wholeness. It starts small. You say no without flinching. You don't over-explain your choices. You leave texts unanswered. You rest without apology. You start protecting your peace like it's oxygen. And slowly, the people around you begin to change too. Some leave, some push harder. But a few, they adapt. They step back. They listen. They meet you, not in expectation, but in presence. These are your people. So I'll ask you this. Are you willing to be disliked in order to be free? Are you willing to be seen as selfish in order to be honest? Are you willing to let go of being the good one to finally be you? That's what this journey is about. If you're already on this path, grieving your old self, reclaiming your space, and learning how to be whole, comment, "I'm becoming" below. Let others see they're not walking this road alone. And if this message held space for you, please like this video, subscribe for more, and share it with someone ready to heal. The work of becoming is never clean, but it's always worth it. So what now? You've walked through rupture. You've buried old versions of yourself. You've survived the silence after saying no. But the real question is, what does it mean to live as the real you? Not the curated self, not the expected self, not the pleasing self, but the wild, flawed, radiant being underneath. It's terrifying at first, because when you strip away the performance, you also lose the applause. When you stop shape-shifting, you realize how many relationships were built on the illusion of who you were pretending to be. But here's the paradox. The more you become yourself, the fewer people you need to impress. The more you accept your shadows, the less you fear being seen. This is the rebirth. A quiet, uncelebrated resurrection that begins with small decisions. You speak with intention. You connect with those who listen, not those who tolerate. You choose authenticity over popularity. And you realize peace is not passive. It's earned. Let me share one last reflection. There will come a moment where someone asks you to shrink just a little so they can feel tall. And you'll remember this journey. And you'll smile, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because you no longer fit inside that smaller self. You've grown. And if you ever feel alone in this process, remember, growth often looks like loneliness at first. because you're no longer available for the version of life that kept you small. Now tell me in the comments, what part of this story felt like it was written for you? Was it the guilt, the silence, the grief, the freedom? Your words may be the reason someone else keeps going today. And if you made it to this part of the video, you're not just watching, you're transforming. Like, subscribe. Share this with someone who's on the edge of becoming. Because no one told you, but I will. You're already enough. You were just never meant to stay hidden